Hi and welcome to Photo IQ. I'm your instructor, Gus Cantivero. This is Unit 5 for Camera Basics. We're going to talk about camera straps, safe operating temperatures, and hot shoes. Let's get started. Okay, let's go over to the side of the camera and we're going to look at the camera strap lugs. And that's on the side. Every camera is going to have a little hole with a stainless steel, usually stainless steel, little wing that's going to come out to the side. And that is where the D-ring, you can see in this little triangle ring, that is going to go through there. And those can be kind of tricky to get on and off. You have to use your fingernail or a little flathead screwdriver or something to kind of separate it, and then you twist it on. It's not very easy, but that's what you have to do if you want to change the strap to a third-party strap. You can either use the strap that comes with your camera, and it's going to have advertising all the way around it with the camera company on it, Canon or Sony or whatever. And they're not necessarily the most comfortable or whatever, but sometimes they're decent. Sometimes they're nice and wide, sometimes they're thin. Rarely do they have any kind of padding. That's extremely rare. So if you wanted to buy one that had the ability for detaching, like I have, so I use a strap from a company called Dispatch. At least I think that's how you say it. It's just DSP, how is it? DSPTCH. I don't know why they felt like eliminating just 2 letters from the name was going to make it that much cooler, but nevertheless, that's the name of it. And they're about $44 for the one that I have, and it has a removable attachment so that I can take my strap off when I don't want it on there. So you can see that's why I always have these little pieces dangling off. Those are the buckles, and they're interchangeable. So I have 2 straps. One is green, and the other one is this kind of like, it's like, what do you call it, olive? Like the military color olive. So they're interchangeable, so I can attach them from one to the other. Now I have both of my cameras tethered together. Let's undo that before something bad happens. So you can see there's a little bit of a reinforcement here. This is a close-up of my actual strap setup. So there's the D-ring, and then you have the little plastic part there, and that just creates kind of a lock in place to make it a little bit more beefy, so that the loop through stays in position. There are other options that you can look at if you don't want a shoulder strap. Some people really hate shoulder straps because they're kind of all over the place. I use them because when I'm traveling, sometimes I have both cameras on at the same time. So I'll have, if I'm shooting like a travel job, I'll have this camera here and the other one will go across this way, and one will have a wide angle and the other one will have more of like a medium angle, and I'm able to bring it up. The other thing that it allows me to do is have another point of contact for stability. So I can actually pull the strap away and you can see how stable the camera is now. Whereas if I'm just hand holding the camera, you know, it's only as stable as my hands will allow. And let's say you've had several cups of coffee and you might be a little bit jittery. You're gonna want a little extra stability. So straps definitely help out that way. And the ability to detach and reattach is a nice feature as well. Some people prefer, and this is all preference, there's no right answer to this. If you have a really small camera, like a little point and shoot or something, these little wrist straps are actually a really nice way to go, because you can just put it on your wrist and you're not gonna drop it. That's another thing. If you're in like a precarious position, let's say you're riding on a ferry and you wanna get an angle that is off the edge of the boat, all right, call me cautious, whatever. If I'm shooting over the edge of a boat, I don't want to drop it. This is some of the most expensive stuff that I own, other than my car and my house. This stuff is really expensive, and I need it to work for me because it's how I make my living. Maybe you don't make your living off of it, but it's still going to be one of the more expensive things that you're going to buy, and you don't want to drop it in the ocean, right? I think that just kind of goes without saying. So at the very minimum, go with a wrist strap. And the ones that I'm showing here are by Peak Design. And they're very popular now in the industry. A lot of people are using these. You'll notice in a lot of camera reviews, or you go on Instagram, there's going to be tons of camera photos. They're all going to have these little red dangly bits. So I have my little buckles, and they make a noise. These guys make a little bit more of a jingly sound, which I kind of don't like. But they have their own kind of special quick release system where there's sort of a circle in here, and you drop that circle in and you pull it and it clicks in place. And now you have a really secure system that is going to prevent it from dropping. So you would just attach this little loop. It would go through your lug on the side, and then you can interchange which strap you want to use. So if you want to have your wrist strap one day, or you want to have the clutch design another day, and that one is going to be one that just you put your hand through and it's going to hug the outside of your hand. So even if you let go, it's going to stay in position. It could still slide off this way, but it's a lot less likely to fall off your hand. And there's also things like if you're traveling in third world countries or something where you're riding on the backs of like tuk-tuks or things like that, where they have open air sides. Thieves will run by or ride by and snag things that you have, and if you don't have them strapped on, they're just going to grab it and ride away. So if you don't have something securing it to your body or person, then it's just not a good idea to be taking it out in public. You're sort of asking for trouble in that way. Okay, one more basic thing that's on every camera is a hot shoe. There's a number of different ways that the shoe design can be used. Typically, the most typical and basic and original use for the hot shoe is the flash. So the reason why it's called hot, anything that's hot in electrical terminology means that power is flowing through it. So on your standard hot shoe design, and these have a little, what's common now is protector plates. That's not historically typical throughout the industry, but in the past couple of years, I've seen a lot of companies include these little hot shoe protectors. So if you're not going to be using your hot shoe for flashes and things like that, I encourage you to keep that protector plate in there and don't lose it, because it'll add just yet one more level of weather protection and sealing. If you are going to be using your flash, take that plate off and store it in your bag, and then put it back on when you're done. It's not the end of the world if you lose it, really, because cameras since the beginning of the hot shoe creation back in the 50s or something, 60s, they didn't have protector plates on them, so you're not gonna destroy anything if you lose it. I did lose it on my Sony. I've been without the protector plate for a while. I'm sure it's somewhere in my house. I have no idea where it is. So you can see on the illustration here, for example, my Fuji came with this really small little flash, which I'm probably never going to use other than to do demonstration videos for Photo IQ. But you can see that the pin registration lines up perfectly with this. And this is the standard hot shoe pin alignment. So any basic flash with a default pin pattern is going to line up with this camera. Now, you can also use the hot shoe for what's called a cold shoe, which is a non-data communication way. Like you could use it just to hold something on there. So there's like little brackets that you can attach to the top if you wanted to add a monitor or something for that effect. And then that would be using it as a cold shoe. And that would have its own little clamp that would screw down and attach to, it has this kind of a design, so it would go in here and then squeeze down. But the most basic use is going to be for a flash. So this is camera basics, so we're not going to be getting into flash photography in this module, but we will in other modules where flash and flash photography is going to be specifically covered. But just as an example, here's that little flash unit that you can see pictured right here. So take my Fuji, pop off the protector plate, and then this slides right there, clicks into place. and then it's now a little pop-up flash, which I gotta say is kind of cute. So I'm not gonna knock on it. It has a lock mechanism on here. So on the back, it just says push, and there's a button. You press that, and it lifts a pin. So you can see the silver pin right there. You press the button, lifts it, and then it slides out. So it actually does lock in position, and you have to press that button to release it. So that's actually a nice design. Because it is so small, if it didn't have that locking pin on there, it might easily come off and get bumped or something like that. If you were, putting it on your shoulder and it were to bump into your bag, or even your rib cage or your arm might swing and pull it, and you could then drop it and lose it. And if you're at the park or the zoo or something like that, that might not be a great thing, because retracing your steps in big places is not fun. So flashes are typically what your hot shoe is used for, but there's other uses. Now next, let's talk about the Sony Smart Shoe. It's a bit annoying because there's a lot of flash applications, or I should say flash accessories, that are not universally compatible with the Sony Smart Shoe. And you can see in the close-up, it has that center communication plate. If I back up and I go to the Fuji image, you can see it has that center plate there, and then there's the 4 pins, which allow communication for reading the meter, so it can understand what kind of a situation you're in. It can tell what kind of flash you need. So if you want to set it to auto, it can just set it to low power fill flash, and it will adjust depending on what your settings are for the camera. If you have it on kind of like dumb mode, where it's like just manual, you have to now control how much ratio you want, how much power you want, half power, 3/4, whatever, 7/8 full power. And it won't be able to tell what the situation is. So you have to make sure that you're buying flashes that are for the Sony shoe, if you want to be able to use intelligent flash modes on your Sony camera. So it is cool because it allows multiple uses, but the bad side is that if you already have a flash, it's not going to be compatible unless it's just manual. And then a further complication is you can see this front ridge here, where on the, back up again, on the Fuji, it does not have that front ridge, okay? And the reason why is because it is protecting these connectors that are in here. And what it's doing is allowing for audio communication. So on the Sony cameras, they are very popular with video making hobbyists and filmmakers and things like that. So this audio unit, for example, which I used to have, and I didn't use it very much, so I sold it, but it actually uses that front data port, and it will allow for nice professional microphones like this XLR audio cable to go, wind its way through the unit into that point there and then get recorded in your final file. Whereas most other cameras don't have an XLR input, so you lose that ability to use those nice microphones. So because that different design, you can still slide the flash in, but it can't lock in place. So you need to make sure that if you want to be able to use a nice flash and you want it to lock in place, which is, that's a nice feature. You don't want your flash falling off. Then it needs to be Sony compatible. Okay, let's talk real quickly before we reach the end of this unit. Let's talk about operating temperatures and a little bit about weather sealing. So operating temperatures are pretty universal throughout the market. They're all going to be from 32 degrees Fahrenheit up to about 104 degrees Fahrenheit, or 0 to 40 Celsius. So that is the internal temperature of the camera. That is not the air temperature, although the air temperature is going to influence the internal temperature. But just like an iPhone or any smartphone that's left in the sun, they can overheat. So let's say you're sitting in the shade and it's only, 85 degrees, but you have your phone over on the side and it's sitting in the direct sunlight. You go to grab it and turn it on and you see that it's actually shut down. It's not there anymore, and you feel it's very hot to the touch. So it's going to combine that external temperature with its internal operating temperature. So if it's like, if you're using it to record video or something, that's going to be very power intensive. It's going to heat up on the inside. If it's also getting hit by the sun, it's going to raise its core temperature, and it can easily exceed 104 degrees. And I've seen it a few times. And once it does that, you're going to get a warning or an error message that tells you that it's shutting down. For example, this is the Sony's error message. It just says internal temperature, internal temp high, allow it to cool. So you shut it off, put it in the shade, or put it in front of the air conditioner or something like that in your car, and that will cool it down. Give it a couple of minutes and it'll allow itself to turn back on again. So these things are temperature sensitive, and you do not want them to overheat. It can cause damage to the electronics. The sensor, most notably, can become overheated and then permanently be damaged, and it'll wreck your camera. Likewise, it can also get too cold. However, when it gets cold, the damage is not permanent. It just makes it so that it can't operate properly. So the buttons might freeze in place. The very sensitive things like your image stabilizer can become so cold that it won't be able to move fluidly. The image might not be recorded properly. You might end up with a lot of noise in your image, things like that. So you don't really have to freak out if it's too cold. Just turn it off, warm it up, put it away. You'll be okay. There are things like weather resistance on cameras, and that has to do with moisture. That does not have to do with temperature. Weather resistance will not impact your camera's ability to operate in the heat or in the cold. But it will protect from moisture getting inside, vapor, water vapor. But if you're operating in an environment where it's very cold air conditioning, and then you exit your hotel room and you go out into a tropical environment, you will notice that the sensor will fog up. Not only just your lens, but your sensor will fog up because of the condensation that's in the air. So the better the weather sealing, the less the moisture will get inside, the less things like that will occur. But you still can't prevent stuff like haze from water vapor. That's still going to occur. So when that happens, don't freak out. Just let it naturally come up to temperature. And it's just like condensation on the inside of your windshield when it's really hot and humid outside and you have your air conditioner on inside. Same thing. The temperature has to reach an equilibrium in order for that stuff to go away. And then when it comes to water and freezing, you can go on, there's a lot of things like, they call them torture tests. And those are not things that I would ever do because it makes me feel really guilty to break stuff. But people will take their cameras and put them outside in freezing temperatures or put them in the freezer, spray water on them to see whether they still operate after they've had half an inch of ice on top of them, let them thaw out, dry the water off, and then turn them on, see if they still work. And surprisingly, a lot of the times they do. These are actually surprisingly tough. These cameras are made really, really well. So you don't have to freak out if you make a mistake with them, but that doesn't mean that you should be stupid. That doesn't mean that you should do things that are risky with them. Like just because your car has a seatbelt doesn't mean that you drive recklessly. That's going to do it for Unit 5 of Camera Basics. We talked about the different kinds of camera straps available to you and the different ways that they can be connected. We also talked about the kinds of hot shoes available on the different camera systems and the different types of flashes or ways that you would use them to attach different accessories. We talked about the cross-compatibility as well between Sony and the other different kinds of hot shoes that are out there. And then lastly, we talked about weather sealing, freeze-proofing, waterproofing, temperature resistance, and all different kinds of safe operating temperatures. Remember, don't overheat your camera. Okay, I hope to see you in the next video. Until then, keep shooting.